We're very similar
That's
in that
great.
way. I'm very impulsive.
Yeah.
Like when people tell me that they're an overthinker, I like couldn't relate less.
Yes,
I
I have that same thing.
I don't overthink, I underthink.
Yeah, I'm also an underthinker.
Justice for underthinkers. We make a lot of mistakes, but we move on. We embarrass ourselves constantly.
That would be a good t-shirt.
That would be.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to get a Barstool t-shirt.
Yeah.
Today, I'm joined by the one and only Erika Ayers Badan. Erika is a seasoned executive and digital pioneer, shaping content creation, distribution, and monetization across influential media and tech organizations. She's held key roles at AOL, Yahoo, Microsoft, and as Barstool Sports' first CEO, transforming it from a regional blog to a national media powerhouse. During her 9 years steering the company, Barstool became a top 10 podcasting publisher in the US, with the world's #1 sports, hockey, golf, and music podcast, and a top 6 brand globally on TikTok. Erika has launched over 35 brands, including breakout franchises like Call Her Daddy. Recognized for her influence and accomplishments by Fast Company, Forbes, The Big Lead, Crain's New York, and Adweek, Erika's career achievements have been nothing short of impressive. Her brand new book, Nobody Cares About Your Career, is available for pre-order and comes out June 11th, 2024. Currently serving on the boards of Premier Lacrosse League, Food 52, and Axon Enterprise, Erika continues to make her mark in the media and tech landscapes. That was impressive. Okay, Erika, how are you feeling today?
Good.
So, like, you just left Barstool a few weeks ago. How does that feel?
Oh, it's like it's all the feels, like leaving a job is a lot. Leaving a job you've been at almost a decade is a lot, and leaving a job that you put all your heart into is, I cried for like a week straight, I feel like. So all over the internet, honestly, which was the worst. Yeah. But I feel good. I'm so happy about having the opportunity to do that, and loved everyone there and learned so much, and it was really all I could ever have asked for.
So do you feel like you mourned? You had like a week of mourning kind of?
Oh, I think I was mourning for like years.
Yeah.
Okay. I think one thing that happens to people is when you're acquired, there is a big mourning process. This was one of the things what's really prompted me to write the book, is I was just very sad after we were acquired by Penn. I just was sad. Yeah. Like I was mourning like the freedom and the creativity and the pirate ship. And
I love the pirate ship.
The pirate ship is the best. And so I think there was a lot of mourning before I had even entertained thinking about conceiving of leaving. So
yeah. I love the saying, what is it? Just because like you're sad doesn't mean it was the wrong decision.
Definitely.
Like you can still be sad about the right decision.
Oh, I'm like sad all the time. And I'm sad all the time. But I think like part of being sad is being like emotional and caring and putting your all into things. And I really do feel like I left it all on the field at Barstool. So I now feel so happy. I feel very calm about it.
So before moving forward, I do have a preliminary question for you.
Okay.
And if you get it wrong, you do have to leave.
Okay, fine.
Everyone here has to leave. The question is, do you know what you're doing?
No, nobody knows what they're doing.
Good, you've asked.
Okay.
You can stay.
Okay, great.
You're safe. First of all, I'd like to go through a little rapid fire round.
Okay.
Just so we can get to know Erika as a human being.
Okay.
A little bit about your background. So first question is, where did you grow up?
I was born in Colorado, in a little like mining town in the middle of nowhere in Colorado. And then I grew up in New Hampshire. We moved to the East Coast, and then I grew up in New England.
I knew that you were a New Englander. How do you feel about being a New Englander?
Oh, I love New Englanders.
Yeah.
Are you a New Englander?
No, I'm from Maryland, so I'm like a mid-Atlanticer.
Okay, yeah, it's different, yeah.
Yeah.
I love being from New England. I love New England.
Next question is, what did your parent or parents do for a living growing up?
Growing up, my parents were teachers, and then my dad was the principal when I was in middle school, which like explains like a whole host of issues. But my parents were in education. They are teachers and professors and administrators.
Okay, so you come from a background of like education and academia.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you go to college, and if so, what did you study?
I went to college. I studied philosophy and sociology.
Okay, so academic pipeline, and then you did not get an MBA.
No.
Anything like that. Okay, and then what was your first job ever?
I lived near Weirs Beach, which is this terrible, terrible. Have you ever been to Weirs Beach? Weirs Beach is disgusting. I lived near Laconia, New Hampshire, and Laconia, New Hampshire has this strip called Weirs Beach, which is kind of like on the edge of the lake where all the arcades are, and there's a bunch of bars, and just kind of boardwalk grossness.
Yeah.
And there was a restaurant at the end called The Pier, which I swear was mob run, but whatever. And my first job was at the counter, like serving Cokes and handing out trays and like giving people fried food. That was my first job.
I'm picturing you wearing like one of those hats, those like white
definitely.
hats.
It was terrible.
And, like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And what is your current job right now?
I don't have a job right now. I'm like the greatest unpaid intern. I sit on a bunch of boards. I'm very active in those boards. I still help out at Barstool when I'm needed and where I'm needed. And that's really it.
Okay, cool. So we're going to get into Barstool.
Okay.
So for those of you who are watching or listening and aren't familiar with Barstool, how would you describe it?
Oh, Barstool it's so hard to put it into one set of words. I think Barstool is like a content factory. It is a place that's so creative, very free. It's designed to make content on the internet to make people laugh, mostly talk about sports, mostly targeted to young guys, not exclusively or entirely, really centered around internet culture, entertainment, pop culture, and sports.
It's also, like you said, a pirate ship in some ways.
It's a pirate ship.
And you've mentioned in the past that Barstool is somewhat misunderstood. What do you mean by that?
I think that Barstool, one of the things I think you see at work or in at least the media industry, which is kind of what I grew up in, is that there's so much time spent talking to advertisers or talking to other distribution companies or talking to what I would call B2B, like businesses talking to businesses. Barstool only ever talked to consumers. Like it only ever talked to its fans. And what was really amazing about that is Barstool and Dave Portnoy, who founded it, are so good at talking to fans that trickled over into how the company talked to businesses.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that Barstool is misunderstood is that all of Barstool's energy and focus is on talking to fans. And so as a result, it kind of leaves people in that business place left out or not informed and certainly not consulted. And so as a result, people make, their own conclusions. And then I think, look, Barstool is a comedy brand as much as it is a sports and entertainment brand. Not every joke lands. Yeah. Most jokes aren't appropriate. Yeah. All jokes are somewhat designed to offend. And so that in its own right creates a lot of misunderstanding.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely in an age where companies are walking on eggshells, especially media companies. And Barstool just said, F that.
Yeah.
We're just going to talk about whatever we want.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
It's been massively successful for y'all because there is an audience that just wants to have fun.
Yeah, wants to hear it straight.
Yeah, they want to hear it straight. But you're going to alienate others, but that's how you create a niched audience. So when it comes to Barstool's business model, I'm so curious, how does that revenue break down? Or I know it probably changed throughout the years, but like in the past year.
So it changed, it's changed since I got there, and it'll change obviously long after I leave. So Barstool's business is really fairly well distributed between a commerce business, so T-shirts and sweatshirts and hats and soft goods, an advertising business, so working with Chevy or Verizon or Abercrombie and Fitch or, really Fortune 100, Fortune 500, and then a lot of D2C brands. We have a pay-per-view business with a brand that we bought called Rough and Rowdy. We have an events business. We had, for a fleeting moment, a subscription business. So we tried a lot of different revenue models to support the business. Really, it's centered on commerce and advertising. Those are the two biggest ones. I would say there's a lot of energy around the events business and the pay-per-view business. That's less consistent and less lucrative.
Yeah.
But that's really how the business breaks out.
So there's a lot of different revenue streams at
Definitely.
Barstool. I mean, yeah, you're selling physical products, you're selling ad space.
We're selling tickets.
Yeah, in-person events. These are like logistically complicated things. How does the team break down between like creators and then people who work? My dad always says people who work in the business and people who work on the business.
I would say there's very few people that work on the business. That was one of our biggest challenges, is we were really, really, really good at working in the business. I think that's like, I'm on the board of a couple companies now, and in the internet kind of media space, they have too many people who work on the business. They don't have enough people that work in the business. I would say the content creators, if Barstool has, I don't know, 350 people, or really doesn't matter proportionally, it's probably a third to, 30 to 45% of the company are people who create content.
And that's how you like it, right?
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
You guys are very, very creator forward.
Definitely.
And do you think okay, so I want to get into this. So you grew Barstool. When you showed up at Barstool, which we're going to talk about, it was a 12-person company?
Probably like 12 to 15.
12 to
like
15,
small.
one office, $5 million in revenue. You grew it to over 400 employees, over $300 in revenue per year, a global expansion. How did you do that? What do you think was like the one key to success, like the one like strength that you had that allowed you to maneuver it to that point?
I think I worked with insanely talented people who were very good at what they do, and who had it. Dave Portnoy has it. Big Cat has it. Alex Cooper has it. Like, they're people who are great at what they do, who produce, Riggs is another great example in the golf space. Like, people who are deeply entrepreneurial and hungry to create things.
Yeah.
So I had a lot to work with. And then I was willing to try most anything and fail often and always. So we were really unafraid to just try to do things. And I always wanted to do it our own way. So if, it's funny, I was writing a deck last night. It's been a while since I've been writing a deck. But I was saying, like, you want to understand how big companies think so you can act accordingly. And I think I always wanted to understand how ESPN thought, or NBC thought, or the people we compete at, Bleacher Report, Turner, so that we could benefit from their experience and knowledge, but we could tweak it and, morph it to work just for us.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing was just not being afraid of what we didn't know, not being unwilling to fail and look stupid, or to try and have things not work.
Yeah.
And then I think there's this kind of like hanging moment in a lot of companies where I think companies tend to think like, ooh, we need to hire someone from the outside to figure out how to do X. And the reality is like, you don't. Like, just take a smart, hungry, really scrappy person inside the company and try. And I wish more companies did that. I think we did at Barstool did a very good job of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You want to pinpoint those resourceful people. So I'm curious, you attribute a lot of your success to the creators and your team around you, but you had to go in and hire those people and call them to the pirate ship. So what is your advice for leaders of businesses when it comes to hiring?
Oh, I think hiring, you got to hire on DNA. I really believe you got to hire on DNA. I think most people, when they're hiring, know in their gut if someone is going to work or not, or if something's going to work or not. You got to listen to your gut. I think a lot of times people can be under pressure to hire, and they're like, oh, I know this person isn't right, but they're good enough. I think good enough hiring is like a whole topic. I think about it a lot. I think good enough hiring isn't great. And then I also think you've got to be clear, like, you've got to give people a vision to buy into. You've got to give people runway to make their own mistakes and to fail. You've got to hold people accountable to an insanely high standard, and you have to be willing to perform at that same standard. And I think if you can do all those things, then most people, you bring in will stick, hopefully. We went through a lot of firing at Barstool, like a lot. Mostly because it was very obvious if you came in, you were either going to work or you didn't. And if you didn't work, you have to get out. And that was a good piece of advice I'd gotten from Peter Chernin once was, you just have to fire fast.
Yeah, hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah, so I think like that's also a big piece of it. It's like when you have someone who isn't great, you just got to move it out.
Yeah, does Barstool have, you guys have like an HR department, right? And
yeah,
all
we
that
have an HR department. Yeah. We don't talk about it much, but we do have an HR department, good HR department.
Yeah.
I think firing is so painful, and it's like one of those things that just eats at you until you do it. As a manager, I think you have to be insanely empathetic, which is it's not about you. I think you have to be firm. I think you have to be clear. I think you have to be direct. I hate when people fire people and they have not given people a chance to do better and they haven't been clear about what's expected of them. I think a lot of times at companies, people can be like, oh, so-and-so sucks, or this, I was on a call this morning. Oh, so-and-so sucks. Like they're not, and it's like, well, does she suck? Or like,
maybe you suck.
Maybe
it's
suck.
a you problem.
Did you give her, were you clear with, what is her job? What does she think her job is? What does she think the expectations of her are? So I think you have to go through that before you get to the, hey, this person isn't working, this isn't a fit. And then when you get to that moment, you have to be like as swift and you got to be surgical.
Where do you think that line is though between like, I need to invest more in this employee and empower them and amp them up and get them excited to work, and like personal accountability and responsibility of like, sometimes people just need to go. Like
Most times people just need to go. Like it's not a fit for them. They're not a fit for you. They don't understand the mission. They're not adept at, delivering the goods or whatever you want them to do.
Yeah.
I think it's like, you almost need to look at it like 20%. Your first 20% is like, get up to speed, you need to do as the manager, the heavy lifting at that first part of like, get someone involved. Make sure people are collaborating with them, make them feel included, give them the floor, like set the table so that they can eat.
I love that.
And I think people shortchange that. I think sometimes you bring people into a company and the other people are assholes. They're like, oh, I'm threatened by so-and-so, or I don't like where they came from, or somebody said something about them about some,
how'd you deal with that? Like drama? I feel like Barstool is very open.
Barstool like airs all its drama out everywhere, and there's certainly
even on the internet?
Plenty of drama. But I think the one thing that is great about Barstool is that it doesn't have a lot of that kind of drama. Like the nature of everything being out in the open means that nothing is really insidious. Yeah. And I think it's more of the insidious stuff that makes companies dysfunctional. And don't get me wrong, Barstool has some of that, but
yeah, for sure. Well, I think something that a lot of companies can learn from Barstool is having a culture, first of all, that when people are coming to the company and applying for a job, they know exactly what they're signing up for.
Yep.
No one came into that interview expecting to be like to have their hand held.
They didn't think it was Condé Nast. Yeah.
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 I love it. Okay, so going back to when you're at AOL, right?
Yeah.
You're CMO of AOL. Mm-hmm. And you get this opportunity to put your name in the hat for the CEO job at Barstool. Mm-hmm. First CEO ever at Barstool. Mm-hmm. What did your friends and family think?
Oh, I had left AOL, so I had spent my whole career thinking that I wanted to be a CMO. And I'd worked really hard for it, and I sacrificed a lot for it, and I really, 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 really wanted it. And then when I got it, I was like, oh, I hate this. This is not for me. I don't want to be doing this. Yeah. And that was hard for me. And I had left AOL and joined a startup. But when I saw, it was an accident that I learned about the Barstool job. I was in Los Angeles. I had a meeting with the Chernin Group, who had just bought a majority stake. Mm-hmm. I had seen the headlines that they had bought a majority stake in Barstool. And I was like, yeah. I love Barstool.
Because you were just a fan.
I was a fan. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's like my dream company to work for. And I remember going to the meeting, and I was like, all I wanted to do was talk about Barstool Sports. And but I knew that they probably were not looking for me or would not consider me. I didn't work in sports. I don't have an MBA. I'd never been a CEO. I was probably not and was not on their radar. Yeah. When I got through so I stalked the opportunity. I really hunted it down. I wanted to work at Barstool. I knew I was meant to, not to be cheesy, but I knew that job was meant to be mine.
So you squashed those negative thoughts of I don't have an MBA, I've never been a CEO.
Definitely. I was anyway. I just want a meeting with Dave Portnoy. What do I need to do to get a meeting with Dave Portnoy? That's really that went through my brain every day. Yeah. And then when I got the job, it was misunderstood. Barstool wasn't known the way Barstool is known now, but I'd lived in Boston forever. I had a lot of friends from Boston. My guy friends were like, this is amazing, but what are you doing? And then my girlfriends, or kind of my professional network, was like, I I don't know, like this
Yeah.
really, like it feels a little off. But I don't think that they saw what I saw, and that was okay. And I actually liked having my back up against the wall. I felt like I had been in 2 jobs that I was not super successful in.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be very successful. And I was like, I don't mind that I'm in a do or die situation.
So you take this job at Barstool, your friends and family are kind of like, what are you doing here? Like, this isn't like, the natural next step for you. You talk in your book about feedback and criticism. In that moment, how did you know to not internalize that feedback and not, take it to heart?
I got a lot of feedback, and then I knew that if I was getting feedback, that was 1/100th of the feedback people were thinking. And I did have a lot of like stuff eating at me where I was like, ugh, like, am I making the right decision? Am I making a mistake? Can I do this? I don't know if I can do this. I'm scared. Like, I had all that. Yeah. But I think like when you wake up in the, like, I tend to like chew on all my problems at night. Like things look really dark and gloomy at like 3:45 a.m. But by the time you get to 7 a.m., it's like, you got to get out of bed. You got to put your pants on. You got to like just start doing something. I like to get a lot of feedback always. I worked for a really incredible woman named Joanne Bradford who gave me a lot of feedback. She gave a lot of people a lot of feedback. I give people a lot of feedback. People don't usually like it, or they don't always like it. I think part of the thing with feedback is like, be respectful to the person who gave it to you. And then in your head, you can be like, you can walk right off. Like, you don't have to take everybody's feedback.
Yeah.
You don't have to listen to everybody's feedback. And then the second thing, the more inner monologue you have, the better off you are, because then your gut becomes stronger. And I think that's an important thing, which is like, I took everybody's feedback. I always take people's feedback. I try not to react to people's feedback. I try to be like, okay, great. Like, tell me more. And then I always debate it.
Yeah. What do you mean by inner monologue?
I think everybody has an inner monologue. Like, it's your insecurity and your ego and your, the hidden desire for who you want to be and what you want and who you think you are. Like, all those 3 people are talking all the time in your emotions and in your head. And when someone from the outside enters the chat for good or bad, or it just adds, it's thinking about, who wants what.
Yeah.
And I think those voices in your head talking, or the thinking that you can do around this perspective or that perspective, I think it helps you. I think it can help you be very rational and also to be very calm because you've already gone through all the yelling. And I think it can also help you have perspective.
I love that. I think that's a really great insight. And something that shows up frequently in your book is like intuition and listening to yourself. And I got to say, I've read like a lot of personal development books, on leadership and business and careers, and just reading something written by such a powerful woman. It's just, you don't talk about how you're a woman a lot in the book, but it just kind of shows through in those little ways. Because I think that's a strength that women have, is like listening to their intuition.
Yep.
So I'm curious. I don't think a lot of people out there actually knew that Barstool had a female CEO, because it's such a bro-y brand.
Totally. Yep.
It's a natty light frat boy brand. And you go in there and they have their king, Dave, and he's very charismatic. He has a strong personality. Everyone loves him. How did you walk in there and take up space and command respect when it was already established?
I didn't think a lot about my gender, and to be honest with you, Barstool was one of the only places I haven't had to think about my gender. It was actually so incredibly freeing. I actually don't think, for as much as people talk about Dave, I really don't think Dave thinks about gender either. Like, if you piss Dave off, Dave will scream and yell, whether you're a woman, a man, anything in between, anything outside that. Like, it doesn't, he's kind of equal opportunity in that. So I think there were a couple things. One is, I think Dave set me up for success in that. I think one of the things that happens a lot with founders is when founders bring in an executive, the founder gives a lot of lip service to this person is going to do that and I'm going to do this. And I would say 8 times out of 10, they don't really mean it. And their insecurity has them clawing at what the executive is there to do. Like I interviewed with I'm still interviewing with a lot of companies where I'm like, you say that you want a partner, but you don't really.
Yeah.
And I think Dave's confidence in himself was really, really important, to be honest with you. And I think he set the stage for me to come in and to do something. So that was the first thing.
So he told everyone, shut up and listen to this girl. Is that what you're saying?
He didn't even need to say shut up. He was like, Erika's here.
Okay.
This is what she's here to do. We're lucky to have her. And that was really it. And then the second piece is I then had the opportunity to listen, to be honest with you. Like I talked to as many people. Those early days at Barstool were crazy, but I talked to as many people as I could to listen what they wanted. I think the other thing that happens in companies is the answers are always all there. Yeah. Like they're always all there. People will tell you, if you listen and you're patient, the answers are always there. So that was the second thing of like taking up the space is I just listened. And there was stuff I was good at that Dave wasn't, and there was stuff that I was doing that Dave was utterly uninterested in. And Dave had a gift that very few people, including myself, could ever come close to. So in that place, it was a great partnership. And then, I wanted to show results, and I wanted to be very deliberate about what we could do. And I wanted to, I remember we had our first offsite where I had a 45-page PowerPoint on my vision and how we're going to do this. Yeah. And I think it was important because I think they would have otherwise been like, who the is this? And what does she want? So I think having a vision and getting people bought into your vision is really, really important. And then you have to show up. Then you have to execute on it. You have to be consistent. You have to be trustworthy. You have to be competent. Yeah. And little by little, I earned more people's trust and I was able to create more value for them. And all I really ever wanted to do was to make their dreams come true and to make them bigger than they ever thought they could be. And, we kind of chipped away at that and that's what happened.
Yeah, you talk about how you like to talk to people who are actually doing the thing.
Definitely.
I love that. Can you tell us a little bit more about people who are doing the thing?
I love the doers. I only want to be with people who are doing the thing, which is a shortcoming. It's not, that's not a great quality of mine.
How's that a shortcoming?
Because I think that I can be dismissive of middle management.
I was curious about middle management at Barstool and if you have any.
We don't really have a lot of middle management. We have people in charge and then people who do things.
And that can suck up a lot of your time.
It was funny in the Penn years, this was becoming a little bit more of a problem where it was when you don't, middle management is really good at keeping things organized, keeping the, trains on time, career pathing, growth. It gives you a stop, it gives you a place to get to and a place to get after that. The thing I struggle with middle management is in my mind, the people who really matter are the people who do and make the thing. Yeah. Could be a piece of data, could be a financial report, could be a piece of creative, could be a product, could be a design, could be a marketing campaign. You name
people
it, whatever
who are pressing
it may
the
be.
Buttons.
I like the button pusher. And I always wanted to be next to the button pushers because I feel like they're the people who could teach me the most. Yeah. And if I could empower the button pushers to push more buttons or push them better, then I could see instantaneous results. I don't like giving someone, a thought or a perspective and then having them give it to someone else and them give it to someone else and them. I'm I just
it's playing a game of telephone.
Yeah. So I think that's probably why, one of the things I learned about myself in the Barstool years, it's I'm probably best in a startup.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was listening to you speak, on other shows, and it sounds like to this day Barstool is still a startup, but they're a huge, huge company.
Yeah, it's run like a startup.
You operate like a startup.
It's run like a startup. So I think I personally am better in that environment. and prefer it.
And there's an energy to startups, and if you can maintain that energy.
Yeah.
But there are downsides to that, like stability. But I don't think anybody at Barstool really is craving like stability and work-life balance. It seems like everybody's very passionate.
Yeah, it's actually, that's what makes it so incredible. Now, there's a cap to it. There's a challenge to it, right? To go from a $500 million business to $1 billion business, or in Barstool's case, like a $350 million business to a $750 million business, you need more middle management. You cannot scale.
You can't scale.
It has to be more durable, repeatable.
Yeah.
So I think there is a huge trade-off to it. And there also is, Dave and I would always say, like at Barstool is just a shortcut. It was a shortcut for me. It's a shortcut for most everyone who works there. Like, I like to work in places with shortcuts.
Okay. What do you mean by shortcuts?
I just think, like, I was never a CEO before. I learned so much because I did so much.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of everyone at Barstool. Like, they came in one door, doing one thing, and you leave out of a totally different door having done something entirely different.
Yeah.
But it's based on your own momentum and your own hunger and your own entrepreneurialism. Like, I like that.
Yeah, it's there if you want to grab it. And that's what's really cool about Barstool. If I was a young person, I would find that very appealing, working in a company where my hard work has a direct payoff.
Definitely.
Into my success.
Definitely.
Okay, so I have a question. You talk a lot about decision making in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And as a CEO, you constantly have to be making decisions. And I'm sure, you go with your gut. You like to fail fast. But I'm sure you've been faced with very, very tough decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you go? Who do you go to? What do you do when you're trying to make a really tough decision?
Ooh, okay. That's a good question, Erin. Everyone has tough decisions, I think, all the time, like in your life and in your work. Tough decisions are tough for a reason, you know what I mean? So I would say, like, they're hard for me, but I think they're hard for everybody. I tend to, like, stew on stuff. Like, I fixate. I think about the decision all the time. It's annoying. I find it myself annoying. It's annoying.
Got it.
But I do think the more you can think through a problem and think about it from different angles and different perspectives, you have to take you out of the equation a lot of times. Like, I think one misstep a lot of people make is you make a decision based on you and what you need, or your ego, or where you are, what you're afraid of, versus what is the right decision overall. So I tend to like to really chew on and think about things a lot. I like to solicit a lot of advice. Sometimes it's hard for me because it's typically when you're faced with a tough decision, there's someone who's going to be angry or disappointed, and that, saying those words out loud and describing the problem can be very difficult. But I think that's also a good practice, because the more, it's kind of like you have to speak it to life. Like, the more you can talk through it, the more confident you become about how you're going to deal with it.
Yeah, I'm a big talker. I like to talk through things.
You got to talk through things. Sometimes you have to talk through things. I'm a big fan of, like, make a list of, like,
pros and cons.
Like, it sounds
big
so
list girl too.
dumb, but like, I'm into that. And then I think the other thing with a decision, a tough decision, is what is the worst thing that can happen?
Worst case scenario. Me
What
too.
is the worst thing that can happen? And then what I think most times you find is that the worst thing that can happen is doing nothing. And so that should, then I give myself, I have to solve this by this date.
Yeah.
And I always have a running list in my head of, like, today I need to deal with X, Y, Z before I do anything else. So that's how I do it.
We're very similar in that
great.
way. I'm very impulsive.
Yeah.
And I'm impatient. I heard you refer to yourself as impatient a lot.
Yeah.
And I'll have people tell me, you're impatient. And I'm like, I don't think that's a bad thing.
No.
I just like to, like, move on things and get things done.
Let's go. Yep.
Figure out if it's going to work or not.
Yep.
Like, when people tell me that they're an overthinker, I, like, couldn't relate, like, less.
Yes, I have that same thing.
I don't overthink. I underthink.
Yeah.
But my husband, I think he does a lot. I lean on him to do a lot of the thinking.
Yeah.
I'll tell him about an idea, and then he'll do the overthinking, and I'll do the underthinking, so we balance each other out.
Yeah, that's right. It's good to have people like that in your life. I agree with that. I'm also an underthinker.
Justice for underthinkers. We make a lot of mistakes, but we move on. We embarrass ourselves constantly.
That would be a good T-shirt.
That would be.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna get a Barstool T-shirt.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask you about all these questions because you're just one of the few people these days who's so frank. So let's talk about boundaries.
Okay.
Workplace boundaries. There's so much talk these days and so many internet videos kind of like poking fun at or like teaching people how to set workplace boundaries. And I think it's confusing for a lot of young people who are just now entering the workforce post-COVID because, their boss will ask them to stay until 5:30 and they're like, I'm done at 5. And we're seeing that with some young people in the workplace that they're going into the workforce. And I'm hearing from like different industries, different managers, lots of different folks that are saying that these boundaries are unusual to them. What do you think about workplace boundaries in general?
I'm a tough candidate to talk about boundaries because I'm horrific at having boundaries. I was just in Africa, and there's a great Swahili phrase that's called kazi ni kazi. Mm-hmm. And kazi ni kazi means a job is a job. Mm. And if I was in Rwanda and you're in Kigali, and there's just billboards, and the billboards will say kazi ni kazi. And underneath the billboard are just people waiting for work. And a job is a job means like any job. So someone drives up and they're like, this needs to be done. You need to work at the market. This, my house needs to be clean. Whatever it is like you're ready, you're there, you're up for a job because a job is a job and you get money from having a job.
Yeah.
I love that phrase. I think it's like in the Swahili phrases of like Hakuna Matata and kazi ni kazi, like I'm kazi ni kazi all day. But I think what's hard about the boundary thing, I completely respect it. Part of the reason I wrote the Nobody Cares About Your Career book is that I agree with you entirely, is that there's this massive gap between management and executives and people who are probably from my generation or before me and the people entering the workforce now. Like it is like
night and day.
Just night and day. It's a totally different language. It's a totally different ethos. And there's a lot of friction.
Yeah.
I don't really believe in boundaries for boundaries' sake. So for example, if you are at work and you're like, I have to leave at 5 because I have a doctor's appointment or I'm, meeting a friend for dinner, I have to take care of my dog, or there's a good reason for it, then like, great, leave at 5 o'clock. I think young people putting too many barriers up to what they will and will not do ultimately is going to hurt them in the long run. And the reason is when you're in your 20s and your early 30s, your only real job is to learn. Like the more you learn, the better off you are. The more you're exposed to, the more you try, the more you like suffer through or sit through, like the better off you are. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people who are like, hey, I'm on the 5, it's what's the Monday one? You told me about the Monday one.
Bare minimum Mondays.
Bare minimum Mondays.
That's a thing.
Quiet quitting. Like there's going to be 70% or 60% or 80% of people who do that. The 20% are going to crush who don't do it. And I always was a little bit insecure in that, like, I wanted to make money. I needed to make money. I had college debts. Like, I needed to, like, get on my own 2 feet. And the more work I could do and the more people I could learn from, in my head, I was like, the more money I'm going to make and the better off I'm going to be. Yeah. And I think, I talk about it a lot in the book, which is I think you can boundary yourself into irrelevance and almost out of existence.
It's true in relationships too, not even just
everywhere.
The workplace.
If you're not going to give yourself and you're not going to try and put yourself through what is uncomfortable, then you're never going to know. Then your world just becomes so small. Yeah. And there's somebody else who's putting themselves out there, who's willing to get hurt, who's willing to try hard, who understands, one of the things I write about a lot, because I see it a lot, is the more you fail when you are early in your career, the better off you are in love, in life, with your body. Like the more you try, the more active you are.
Just ask anybody who works in sales.
Exactly. Like the better off you're going to be. And if you boundary yourself into a cocoon, and that fairly or even moderately or kind of shitty thing happens and you're 40, you don't know how to handle it, and it's a catastrophe. And then there's a lot more on the line. You have a family, you have a house, you have a mortgage, you have bills. Like, so my thing is, people can boundary themselves all they want. I think it's a detriment to your personal growth.
Yeah. Part of me has like this admiration for this soft, like workers' rights movement going on right now. I think that's largely due in part to social media. And I love the boundary setting. I love people, pay transparency. Like I'm all for this stuff. I think just like any movement, you need to sift through it and apply it to your life what you want to, and don't just like start telling your boss like no all the time, because that's just going to put you in that cocoon. So I'm curious, like there is a big trend I'm seeing now with young people. And to clarify, I talk to young people, and when I say young people, I mean like college grads, every single week. And many of them are extremely hardworking and anxious, and they want to make money and they want to be successful. However, I am hearing that some of them obviously are leaning into quiet quitting, lazy girl jobs, bare minimum Mondays, where they're kind of setting these things up where they're like, my job is just a job, like I don't care, I'm just gonna do the bare minimum, act your wage and all this. And part of me is like, yeah, just make a job part of your life. A job is just a job. You do need to have balance in your life. And part of me is like, don't you want more? Like, don't you want to make more money? Like, don't you want to be more successful? And that's the difference I'm noticing between millennials and Gen Z, is I've noticed this apathy. So people like you, I'll talk to, very successful people who give awesome career advice, and I'll pass it on to these younger generations. And again, a lot of them are very receptive, but some of them I've noticed just don't care.
Yeah. I think that I agree with you. Look, I think that for women in particular, the workplace over history, at least in American history, has been fairly hostile. Like, it's not great. Like sexual harassment, the glass ceiling. Now there's a lot on the glass floor where women are brought in to clean up a man's mess, and then they're penalized.
I haven't heard of the glass
that's
floor.
A good one.
What's that?
It's that women are being brought in to clean up a man's mess. So there'll be a male executive, he bombs, he fucks it up, whatever. You bring in a woman, she can't fix it, and then she's blamed because for the problem.
Oh, we've seen that. We have seen that multiple times.
So there's a lot of that.
Oh my gosh.
I think like workers' rights are great. Like, people should be treated fairly. They should be paid a fair living wage.
Yeah.
Like, promotions should be consistent. Like, you should have a manager that you're able to trust. Like, all that stuff is really good.
Yeah.
I think what's hard about what's happening though is that, and it's not the fault of work. It's that it starts all the way back to, when you play middle school soccer now, like everybody gets the trophy, and the whole notion of inclusion is actually becoming an expectation of like, it's sameness, it's same treatment. Everybody wins. Nobody should lose. It's like we're dulling the edges of these people culturally, like as parents and coaches and teachers. Like, we're dulling this thing so that by the time the product of it, which is a human being in their early 20s, they don't know it. They've never experienced anything but, parenting is being replaced by people on a screen. Like, when you're on your screen all day long, you're just getting massive hits of dopamine that feel good. Anything that isn't the screen doesn't feel as good. And people are avoiding pain. They're avoiding hard work. They're avoiding experience, really because there's something much better on a device that doesn't put you in any way to be uncomfortable.
It's not two-way, it's just a one-way.
Exactly.
You get to control the communication.
You're totally in control.
Yeah.
Which is a good segue into, if you're a 20-something and you're at work, or even a 30-something, or frankly a 40-something, you're not in control. And that can be upsetting and bewildering. So I think there's a lot of this trend happening. I think it will continue to happen. I think, to your point, I totally agree. Like, people need to buy into it or not buy into it for themselves. I know a lot of people who work to live And I know a lot of people who live to work. I'm a live to work person. Not really even for the money, or I'm just like so fulfilled
Me
and
too.
interested.
I just like working.
love people.
I like projects and
Same.
yeah, like
I'm like,
people
oh, it feels so good to do
complete something. Yeah.
And maybe we're psychos, but like
Yeah,
I think
we're the anomaly.
It's okay not to love your job. And to be honest with you, you're not going to love every job. And it's honestly the jobs that kind of suck and that you hate that you might actually learn the most from.
Absolutely. If that's not the truth.
That 100%. But so I think you just want to experience it and try.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I think about it is that like, look, like when I was in my 20s, there wasn't social media. And there wasn't this illusion that you can make a living by what's happening culturally, I think, is this like adulation of lifestyle. Like Devin, like I'll give a Devin example. Like Devin, who works with us at Barstool, is a phenomenal talent. And I asked her once, I was like, oh, like, what would you do if you weren't doing this? And she like brought up the Jenners, you know what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
I was like,
The Jenners.
But the Jenners are making a business out of their lifestyle, which means that every hungry, entrepreneurial, young, talented female is like, I can make a business out of my Instagram, out of my lifestyle. And that's confusing. We never had that.
It's so, and you know what's even more confusing is I'll hear parents say, my kids are supposed to be an influencer. And I'm like, you can make a lot of money. It's a real industry and it's becoming more of a real industry. Your kid really can, but it's they have to be an entrepreneur at the same time. It's not like every kid can do it. If you can start your own business, it's kind of like becoming a famous musician or like an athlete. Like you have to put in the work, but it's not like, don't shrug it off if your kid wants to be an internet person, but definitely prepare them for how difficult that path may be.
That's right. Yep.
But yeah, I think social media is screwing with our generation more than we can possibly know.
Totally.
And in decades from now, they'll be doing psychological studies on us.
Definitely.
Okay, so moving on to some fun questions for you. Let's get done talking with business. Actually, we might still be talking about business, but what's a piece of advice or feedback that you're happy you ignored?
Oh, like not to take the Barstool job would be a good one. To be more obedient, to be more follow the rules, like to be patient. I hated that kind of advice. I would get advice like that a lot. And then the other piece of advice I really resent is like to just slough things off, like to not care so much. Like don't care so much. Why do you care so much?
It's like, no, be passionate.
Yeah,
you should
I'm
care.
like, oh, like
it's good
you
to care
don't
about
care,
things.
then what do you have? You know?
Yeah, I'll have people tell me, just be patient. And I find again, I'm like you. I don't like to think about the fact that I'm a woman a lot.
Yep.
Like, I don't really subscribe to that. I grew up with a dad who was very entrepreneurial. He told me to have my own business, be my own person, just like my brothers. So I just like to think about myself as a business person.
Yep.
So I find, though, as a woman, as a leader, and as I'm growing older and, having more responsibility, I struggle with, like, the likability and being a woman leader. And like kind of people pleasing, because I find that as a woman, I'll do something, and if a guy did it, I truly feel like people would be like, oh, that guy, he knows what he's doing. But for me, it's like, oh, she's kind of a diva. She's kind of difficult to work with. Have you ever run into that?
I mean, it's kind of like the Taylor Swift song. Like, it's like it's exactly the man. Like it's, and it sucks for women. Like if you are hard on someone, you're a. How you dress at work is just such subject of conversation. Whereas I don't find, one, it's so great to be a woman because you can dress in so many different ways. You can be different characters all the time. But the likability one, I think likability at work is kind of deadly for men and women. And I see guys have it as much as I see women have it. I think if you have an overwhelming desire to be liked, you're kind of fucked, because you will never give hard feedback. You'll never make the hard call. You will not make people unhappy when making people unhappy is the key to making things better and to having purpose and to experiencing growth. And I think for women, sometimes like, It's so funny. I'm working with this company now on their board, and it's mostly women, and they're so focused on like being scripted and being perfect. Like it's like, okay, we got to write the notes about what we're going to say at the meeting before we have the meeting. And I'm like, it's like I've been raised by wolves, where I'm just like, at Barstool, we winged everything. I love
so
winging
liberating.
Shit. It's awesome. And it's also so efficient from a time perspective. I'm like, oh my God, like, what am I going to say at the meeting? I don't know. It's like 2 days from now. I have no fucking idea. But I think that it's hard for women because the expectation of, I look at the women who came before me, and the expectation of perfection is just daunting. Like, I'm so grateful for the women who I was mentored by, because they had it so much worse than I have it, and you're going to have it so much better than I have it, and someone after you,
I hope
same thing. Like, that's going to happen. It's a fucking slog, but like, we're going to get there. I think we have to change the conversation, or, from being liked to being respected. And I think, if you can... Yes, of course, everybody wants everyone to like them. Yes, they want to have connection. But you know what? The higher you get up the food chain, the lonelier it is, and the less people are going to like you. And that's just a fact for men and women. And the more you can focus on being respected and being trusted, I think that ultimately should replace likability.
Yeah.
I think the other thing with that is that likability is about your ego. And I think there's just too much ego at work. Being respected and being trusted is actually about what you deliver for other people.
Absolutely.
And I think changing your mind from like, do people like me? Like, to do they respect me, and, do they value me? And that, I think, is a good, different way to think about it.
And respect is playing the long game. Like, I think character is the long game with a lot of those things. People watch you over time, and they see the decisions that you make and the things that you do. That's something I have to face as an internet creator. Like, I just turned down a huge brand deal because I was like, doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah.
And yet, other creators obviously say yes to that because we all got to pay our bills, and I don't judge them, but my audience will probably like never see that I did that.
Yep.
But over time, maybe it'll like compound.
Yep.
So I assume it's kind of the same being a CEO.
Yeah.
What was a lesson, either personally or professionally, that you had to learn the hard way?
Oh, like so many. It's hard for me to say no to things. It's hard for me to say no to things. I like to say yes to everything. Like, I am always in. And it really depleted me. Like, I was initiating so much stuff at work and in life and social, and like, I was just taking on too much.
Yeah.
I always have kind of taken on too much. Learning how to say no. And how to shut things down has I've always struggled with that. So that's like one thing that like I still struggle with that to this day. Like, people will ask me to do things. I'll be like, yes, of course I'll do that. And then I'm like, what have I signed myself up for? I've signed on to do too much. So
I love it. Have you read Shonda Rhimes' book, Year of Yes?
No.
It's a really good chapter in there where she talks about saying yes to saying no.
Okay, that's great. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, you should challenge yourself to say no. I'm like that too. I just want to do everything.
Yeah, totally. And you're hard, and then you can't, and then you don't do it well, and then it's frustrating. It's like this cycle that's very hard to get out of. Yeah.
So you just came out with this book.
Yes.
No One Cares About Your Career. It comes out June 11th, and it's available for pre-order right now. It is the book that many people need to read right now, including myself. It's tough love, but it's helpful and it's actionable. So I'm curious, from your perspective, why do you think this book is so important for people to read, and who do you think it's for?
Ooh, okay, that's a great question. I think I wrote this book for, and I kind of say it at the beginning of the book, but like, who is this for and who is this not for? Like, I wrote this book for like anybody who wants to use work to have a better life. Like, that's really what I care about. So you could be 65 or you could be 17. Like, it really, I think it's for anybody who thinks that what they do all day can be a vehicle for being most fulfilled, most happy, most productive, most enriched, to be honest with you. Now, I think technically speaking, the book is for probably like recent grads of college and people who are in their 20s and early 30s managing through their career. Like, there's a lot about working in an office, and there's a lot about, how to make it work with your bosses, and what about when your coworkers are idiots? Like, I think there's a lot like that.
It's very frank.
It's very frank, I guess. I went and walked down the bookstore aisle. Every business book feels so clinical, and they feel so clinical, and then the covers are like big letters and blue and white, and it's like red and block colors. And here's what I've seen, here's what I've learned. I'm in the middle of my career. Yeah. I'm still going through this. I'm writing a chapter about leaving your job as I'm thinking about leaving a job. So I also think there's a proximity to people at work because I'm still in work.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's you can tell that like you're in it when you're writing it. It's funny. A lot of my favorite like personal development, professional development, nonfiction books are written by men. However, I find that some of the tips sometimes they have, I feel like I can't apply. And then I go read books written by women and I feel like they're too squishy.
Yeah.
I feel like they're too empathetic.
Yeah.
And so the men are too like, go in the meeting and put your nose up and sit at the table. And the girls are like, feel your feelings.
Yeah,
it's okay.
yeah. Yep.
I feel like you are perfectly in the middle.
That's nice.
With this, where you're like, you're lazy, but here's what to do next.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I needed that. Oh, well, that's great. I'm really excited for you and for this book. So the last thing that I like to do here is so funny because you actually give advice on your Instagram and your TikTok and your social media channels. You give one-on-one advice. People write into you and you give them advice.
Okay.
The last section of this show is that people write in to me.
Yeah.
And we co-author advice.
Okay, great.
So somebody wrote in, anonymous from Vancouver, said, Dear Erin and Erika, I have about 7 years of experience in marketing and am looking to enter into management. Last year, I quit my job and took my first campaign manager role at another company. Fast forward 3 months later, I got laid off on good terms. However, the situation left me so depressed that I decided to take 1 year off. During this time, I traveled and focused on recovering my mental health. I'm ready to go back into the job market and am actively looking for employment. But I dread the idea of having my interviewers ask me about my 1 year gap and the short run at my last job. How do I tactfully answer those questions? Thanks in advance. You got to spin it. I think you got to spin it. You got to be careful with your words. You can't just say, you know, I felt bad, my mental health got bad, so I took off and went traveling. I think that's cool, and I think that you can incorporate, you know, part of that into your story to make you more human. What they're thinking, you don't want them to think, if we hire you, you're just going to fall apart. Or you're just, frankly, that's what they're thinking. And it might not sound nice to other people, but that is frankly what they're thinking. And so you just want them to think, this person made an intentional decision. Now they're seriously back in the game, and if we hire them, it's going to be the best decision we made this day. And so crafting your answer to elicit that response.
That's great.
Be my advice.
I love that. My advice would be, I think a lot of times like shit happens in your life, or you decide to take a year off, and it's really like nobody's business. Like, I really think people get like, it's such a stumbling block to get back in, and it's kind of in your head a little bit.
Yeah.
I totally agree with your advice. I think my perspective would be to own it and be totally intentional, right? Like, hey, I had this job, I then moved to this job, they had a layoff, I had an opportunity to go see the world, and I did it.
Had an opportunity, I love that.
Had an opportunity to go travel the world, I took it, I saw some incredible people, learned a lot, blah, blah, blah. And then I think it's like, and here's why I'm going to crush it at this job. I think one thing that happens for people interviewing is that it's kind of lazy interviewing. It's like, I'm going to show up, I'm going to send my resume in, I'm going to DM you on LinkedIn, I'm going to talk to a recruiter, and then I'm going to hope you follow up with me, and I'm going to show up. Like, if you really want a job, you got to chase the job down.
Yeah.
And that's what they're going to see. Nobody really actually cares what you did before. They don't care where you went to college. Like, that's why this book is called this. Like, they don't care. Yeah. What they care about is like, to your point, are you going to make me look good by hiring you?
Yeah.
And so like, so long as you do that, I think you're great.
I think that's so true. That's something that I come back to with people is think about the interview backwards. So don't think about what answer you're going to give. Think about what answer they want to hear. Yeah. And then like curate that to your experience. Right. Yep. But I love talking about, what you learned while you were traveling, and then quickly getting to the point of this is why I'm going to kill it at this job. Right. Don't ruminate too long on that. Erika, where can people follow you, connect with you, see what you're up to?
Ooh, okay. So people can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm just under my name at LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. You can find me on Instagram at Erika.
How did you get at Erika?
Oh my gosh.
I need to ask you that.
We hunted that thing down.
Really? Oh, so it was
Yes.
like intentional.
Somebody had it, and I wanted it. And Paul Golzinski, who runs social at Barstool, is like the best social person I've ever met in my life. He helped me get it. So we have Erika on Instagram. It was a dormant account, and so we got it.
Okay.
And then I think it's Erika _ on everything else.
And this dress. Tell us about this dress real quick.
So I made this dress in Africa.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
which is a good thing, like to the segue of the, what did you do in your year off? I was there's this just, I'm maybe naive, but I went to this market where you could buy fabric, and I bought so much fabric. I'm like walking out of the market. I'm the only white person forever, and I've got like 15 fabrics. And then I found a tailor, and I always wanted to make clothes, like as a little girl. And
Okay.
like always wanted to make clothes. And so I sketched out for this tailor this vision I had for a shirt and a skirt. And then amazingly, he measured me, and then the next day I had a dress.
No way.
So I was like, oh, this could be so cool. And then I went and found a women's collective where they actively make clothing. And what's really amazing about Rwanda is after the genocide, women have been really empowered because there were so many people who died, really necessitated women being in the workforce and women being empowered. So women's rights are kind of present in Rwanda. And so I went to this women's collective where they make dresses. I found this lady, Bernadette.
We love Bernadette.
Bernadette was amazing, and I gave Bernadette my pile of fabrics and then came home with a bunch of clothes.
No, that is the coolest
So
thing.
then I'm like, maybe I could make a business out of this.
I would buy that.
Would you?
Yes.
What I want to do is I would say, Erin, here's my website, or we do it as like a social account. You can choose the style. So maybe you want like a strapless dress, or maybe you'd want a crop top and a skirt, or maybe you want whatever. Then you pick your fabric.
Okay.
Then you send in your measurements.
Yeah.
And then like 2 weeks later, you get a dress.
From Bernadette.
From Bernadette or someone like Bernadette.
I would want Bernadette to make mine. I would absolutely
Would you do it?
Do that.
Okay.
Yes, I would. If
How
it was
much would you pay for it?
If it was Bernadette or the women in Rwanda making it, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
That seems extremely high quality.
It's like, feel it. It's like, it's so
I'd
thick.
probably pay a few $100s for this.
See, that's what I think too.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to make this.
All right. I'll be your first customer.
Okay, amazing.
All right. Well, thank you, Erika.
Thank you so much.
So much for
I
being here.
appreciate it.
Everyone go buy No One Cares About Your Career, because no one cares about your career, and that's the best news
Because
ever.
no one knows what they're doing.
Because no one knows what they're doing. Look at us. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I
Erika.
appreciate it.